You stack 20 cords of firewood against the side of your house every fall. You cover it with a $60 tarp from the hardware store, and by January, half of it is soaked. The bark is black with mold. The wood hisses and spits when you throw it in the stove. You're burning wet fuel and wondering why your heating bill won't come down. Meanwhile, in 1832, a fur trapper named Nathaniel Wyeth spent the winter at a camp in the Blue Mountains of Oregon. Temperatures dropped below -20 Fahrenheit. Snow buried the ground for 5 months straight. He had no tarp, no plastic sheeting, no concrete pad, and his firewood burned clean and hot every single night from November to April. How? Because Wyeth didn't try to keep water off his wood. He built a system that made water leave on its own. And the difference between those two ideas is the reason your firewood fails every winter. Today, we're pulling apart the one method that mountain men, frontier settlers, and Scandinavian woodsmen used for centuries to keep firewood bone dry through the worst winters on Earth. No tarps, no sheds, no electricity, just an understanding of how wood and water actually work. And here's the part that should bother you. This method is simpler, cheaper, and more effective than anything you're doing right now. Let's start with what you're doing wrong. Because the modern firewood storage system is broken in ways most people never think about. Walk into any suburban backyard in October and you'll see the same thing. Wood stacked flat against a wall. A blue tarp draped over the top. Bungee cords holding it down. It looks protected. And it's rotting your wood from the inside out. Here's what nobody tells you about tarps. A tarp doesn't just keep rain out. It keeps moisture in. Sun heats the air underneath. Moisture in the wood starts to evaporate. But the vapor has nowhere to go. It hits the underside of the tarp, condenses back into droplets, and drips right back onto the wood. You've built a greenhouse for mold. According to research from the University of Wisconsin Extension Forestry Program, wood stored under non-breathable covers retains 15 to 25% more moisture content than wood stored with proper airflow. That's the difference between wood that burns and wood that steams, and it gets worse. When you stack wood directly against a wall, you eliminate airflow on one entire side. The back row never dries. It sits there for months, pressed against siding or brick, absorbing moisture from the ground and the wall itself. By midwinter, those back rows are sitting at 30 to 40% moisture content. Anything above 20% doesn't burn efficiently. Above 25%, and you're not heating your home. You're boiling water inside your stove and sending heat up the chimney as steam. The EPA's BurnWise program puts it plainly. Burning wet wood produces up to 60% more particulate emissions than dry wood. Your stove works harder. Your chimney clogs faster. You use more wood to get less heat. And every time you open that stove door and smell that sharp, acrid hiss, that's water fighting fire. Fire loses. Now here's the real cost. The average American household that heats with wood burns between 4 and 6 cords per winter. At roughly $250 per cord in most regions, that's $1,000 to $1,500 in firewood. If 20% of that wood is too wet to burn well, you're wasting $200 to $300 per season. Not on bad wood, on bad storage. The modern tarp and stack method feels right. It looks like you're protecting your investment, but you're trapping the very thing you need to get rid of. A mountain man in 1832 would have looked at your tarp and laughed. Not because he was smarter, because he understood one thing about wood that the hardware store never told you. Here's where it gets interesting. The mountain man's secret wasn't a product. It wasn't a material. It was an arrangement. A specific way of stacking wood that turned the woodpile itself into a drying machine. It's called the Holzhaufen, or in English, a holtz hausen. The term is German, but the method showed up independently across Scandinavia, the Alps, the American frontier, and rural Japan. Anywhere people depended on wood heat and couldn't afford to waste a single log. Instead of stacking wood in long, flat rows against a wall, you build a round tower. The base is a circle, roughly 6 to 10 feet across. You lay the first ring of split logs around the outside edge like spokes on a wheel, bark facing out. Then you fill the center loosely with smaller pieces, offcuts, and kindling. Then you build the next ring on top of the first. Same pattern. Bark out, loose center. Ring after ring, the tower rises. Most Holzhaufens stood 5 to 7 feet tall. The top was finished with a slight dome, the final layer of wood angled outward like shingles on a roof. And the wood inside was drier than anything you've ever pulled off a modern rack. In 2008, a forestry study conducted by the Norwegian Institute of Bioeconomy Research tested Holzhaufen-style stacking against conventional row stacking in identical conditions. After 6 months, the round-stacked wood measured an average moisture content of 15%. The row-stacked wood sat at 25%. Same wood, same weather. 10 percentage points of difference, created entirely by arrangement. 15% is ready to burn. 25% is fighting you every time you light a match. Here's what the mountain men figured out that we forgot. A round woodpile creates its own chimney effect. When the sun warms the outer wall, the air between those outer logs heats up. Hot air rises. As it rises out the top, it pulls cooler, drier air in through the gaps below. The loose center acts as a vertical air shaft. The whole structure breathes. This wasn't accidental. Frontier journals from the 1830s and 1840s describe wood piles built this way with specific attention to the center gap. Osborne Russell, a trapper who spent 9 years in the Rocky Mountains and published his journal in 1914, described camp wood piles built in the round, and noted that wood prepared this way would take a spark readily, even after weeks of snowfall. His camps were in the Yellowstone region. Winters there regularly hit -30. The bark-out orientation on every ring served a second purpose. Bark is wood's natural rain jacket. It sheds water on the outside and slows absorption on the cut face inside. By facing bark outward on every ring, the mountain man created a self-shingled wall. Rain hit the bark, ran down the outside, and dripped off the bottom. The cut ends faced inward, exposed to circulating dry air, and lost moisture fast. Now let's talk about why this worked at the level most people never consider. Because the Holzhaufen isn't just clever stacking. It's applied thermodynamics. Wood holds water in 2 forms: free water and bound water. Free water sits in the cell cavities, the empty spaces inside wood fibers. This is the easy water to remove. It moves out through evaporation when exposed to air. Bound water is different. It's trapped inside the cell walls themselves, held there by hydrogen bonds at the molecular level. Getting bound water out requires sustained airflow and time. The fiber saturation point, the moment when all free water is gone but bound water remains, sits at about 28 to 30% moisture content for most hardwoods. Everything above that number is free water. Everything below it is the hard stuff. Here's why the round stack wins. A flat row stack against a wall gives you airflow on 2 faces, the front and the top. That's it. The back is sealed. The bottom is sealed if it's on the ground. 2 drying faces. A Holzhaufen has airflow on every surface. Every log in the outer ring is exposed to moving air on its bark side and its end grain. The interior chimney effect pulls air through the center continuously. The dome top sheds rain while still allowing moisture to escape upward. Research published by the Forest Products Laboratory at the USDA in Madison, Wisconsin, confirms that end grain dries 12 to 15 times faster than face grain. This is because the cell structure of wood runs lengthwise. Water travels through these cells the way liquid moves through a bundle of drinking straws. When you expose the cut ends to moving air, you're opening both ends of every straw. The water practically falls out. In a flat row stack, end grain is often pressed against the next log. In a Holzhaufen, every end grain surface faces either the open center or the open air. You're maximizing the fastest drying pathway on every piece. And here's the part that makes the dome critical. When it rains or snows, a flat tarp collects water in pools. Those pools sit there, seeping into the wood below. The dome shape of a properly built Holzhaufen does what every roof on Earth does. It sheds water outward. Snow slides off. Rain runs down. The top logs take the weather so the inner logs don't have to. And because those top logs are angled, they dry faster than flat-stacked wood after every storm. The University of Maine Cooperative Extension measured wood drying rates in round stacks versus covered row stacks over 3 New England seasons. The round stacks reached below 20% moisture content, an average of 8 weeks faster. In a region with a short summer and a long heating season, 8 weeks is the difference between burning seasoned wood in November and burning green wood until Christmas. For your wood stove, this means one thing. A Holzhaufen built in April or May will be ready to burn by October. The same wood in a row stack under a tarp won't be truly ready until January, if at all. So if this method worked for centuries across 3 continents, why did we stop doing it? The reason it disappeared is simple. We stopped needing to be good at firewood. In the 1940s and 1950s, cheap oil and gas heating spread across rural America. When you could heat your home by turning a dial, wood became a backup, not a lifeline. The knowledge that kept frontier families alive through Rocky Mountain winters became optional, and optional knowledge dies fast. By the 1970s, the Back to the Land movement brought firewood heating back. But the people picking it up were learning from hardware store pamphlets, not from old-timers who had spent 40 winters perfecting their woodpile. The pamphlets said, stack it in rows, cover it with a tarp, wait a year, and that advice stuck. The firewood accessory industry didn't help. Today, you can spend $150 on a steel firewood rack that holds a quarter cord. You can buy fitted covers, ventilated tarps, even log drying kilns for $1,000 or more. None of these products existed before the 1960s. None of them are necessary. We traded a free method that used physics for an expensive method that fights physics. We traded knowledge that cost nothing for products that cost everything. And the firewood in a $150 rack is still wetter than the wood a fur trapper stacked in a circle on bare ground 200 years ago. Here's what gets me. This method is still alive. In parts of Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, you can drive through rural villages today and see Holzhaufens standing in yards, perfectly round, perfectly domed. Some families have built them the same way for generations. In Vermont and New Hampshire, a handful of old-school woodcutters still stack in the round. They'll tell you their wood burns hotter, seasons faster, and lasts longer than anything on a rack. The knowledge didn't disappear everywhere. It just disappeared from the mainstream. It got replaced by products. You don't need a rack. You don't need a tarp. You don't need a shed. You need a flat patch of ground, split wood, and about 2 hours. Here's how to build a Holzhaufen that will keep your firewood dry all winter. Step 1. Pick your spot. You want a level area with good drainage, not in a low spot where water pools, not under trees where dripping leaves keep the pile wet. Open air is best. Sunlight helps, but isn't required. The chimney effect works day and night. Step 2. Build the base. Lay down a ring of split logs on the ground, bark facing down, in a circle about 8 feet across. This keeps the first real layer off the dirt. If you want extra insurance, lay 2 parallel logs as runners first, then build the ring on top of them. This creates an air gap under the pile. Step 3. Stack the first ring. Place split logs around the circle with the bark side facing out and the cut end pointing toward the center. Lean each piece slightly inward, about 10 to 15 degrees. This lean is what gives the structure stability as it rises. Step 4. Fill the center. Toss in smaller pieces, scraps, and kindling loosely. Do not pack them tight. The center needs to stay open enough for air to move through it. Think of it as the chimney of the whole system. Step 5. Keep building. Repeat the ring and fill pattern. Every 3 or 4 rings, check that the inward lean is consistent. The wall should get slightly narrower as you go up, like a gentle cone. Most builds top out at 5 to 6 feet. Step 6. Build the dome. The final 2 or 3 layers angle outward instead of inward. Place logs bark up, overlapping like shingles. The goal is a gentle peak that sheds water to the outside. No flat top. Flat collects water, round sheds it. Common mistake: stacking bark inward. This exposes the cut face to rain and traps moisture against the bark inside. Always bark out on the walls, bark up on the dome. Your first Holzhaufen will look rough. That's normal. By the second one, you'll have the lean and the rhythm. A well-built stack holds itself together through wind, rain, and snow without a single strap or cord. The inward lean and the weight of the center fill lock everything in place. For timing, wood split and stacked in a Holzhaufen by May will measure below 20% moisture by October in most climates. The same wood in a row stack under a tarp will take until December or January to reach the same level. That's 2 to 3 months of better burning. Over a full winter, at 4 to 6 cords of consumption, you'll burn less wood for more heat. The savings pay for nothing, because the method costs nothing. The mountain man standing in the Blue Mountains in 1832 wasn't stacking firewood for fun. He was solving a physics problem. Water is the enemy of fire. Airflow is the weapon. And a round pile with a hollow center is the most efficient airflow machine you can build with nothing but an axe and a clearing. We traded that knowledge for a $60 tarp and a $150 rack. His firewood burned clean. Yours hisses. The physics hasn't changed. The only thing that changed is we stopped listening to the people who got it right. If you found this valuable, subscribe to this channel. We explore forgotten methods every week, showing you how people solved problems we still face today. And the solutions are almost always simpler, cheaper, and better than what the hardware store is selling you. Until next time, stack smart.